On Primetime Politics tonight, the Russian president blames the West for his war against Ukraine, a day after Canada's Prime Minister makes a surprise visit to Kyiv and announces more military support for Ukraine. I'll speak with this parliamentarian from Ukraine about the latest developments in Canada's support. The first official Conservative leadership debate occurs Wednesday, and it follows a sometimes nasty debate last week. One leadership candidate says it's got to stop. Ontario MP Scott Aitchison will join me to discuss the race and his plan for a better Canada. And our panel of parliamentary reporters weighs in on the Conservative leadership race and Canada's response to the war in Ukraine. And we will begin tonight with the latest on the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin used the May 9th patriotic holiday in Russia to justify his war on Ukraine. As the Russian leader oversaw the Victory Day parade, he accused the West of leaving him no choice but to invade Ukraine. But he did not, as expected, declare all-out war, threaten nuclear attacks, or provide any indication of where the conflict might be headed. As Putin rallied against the West, Canada's Prime Minister visited Poland today, a day after his surprise visit to Kyiv, where Justin Trudeau presided over the reopening of the Canadian embassy there. He also met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and promised more military assistance for Ukraine and more sanctions against Russia. And he had this to say about the actions of the Russian leader.
It is clear that Vladimir Putin is responsible for heinous war crimes. There must be accountability. Canada will support Ukraine as you seek justice for your people who Russia is killing and brutalizing.
Let me bring in Rudik now. She is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament and leader of the Golos party in Ukraine. She joins me from Kyiv. Ms. Rudik, thanks for taking time to speak with me. We've spoken before, and I appreciate you taking time again tonight. First, can you tell us what the situation there is there now? Have there been any stepped-up attacks from Russia? Because a lot of people were worried that this is a day Vladimir Putin would pick to increase attacks in Ukraine. What's the situation tonight?
Hello, thank you so much for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here on the show. So we were indeed worried a lot about today's day and what could happen. I can tell you personally, we were worried that there could be a tactical nuclear attack on Kyiv or some of the major cities of Ukraine. Thank God it didn't happen. Thank God that Putin did not announce on some further steps. On the other hand, we also know that he usually acts without announcing of what he would do. So today was fairly peaceful in Ukraine. However, there was an attack on the school in the east of the country, and so now the amount of children that were hurt are still being calculated. We have all listened to what Mr. Putin was saying in the Red Square. I can tell you this is a great example of an answer of why we cannot get into agreement with Russia. They live in this imaginary world where NATO wanted to attack them, where Ukraine is not a sovereign can attack us, where Russian soldiers are fighting on their land, which I totally disagree because it's our land, Ukrainian land, right, and so on and so on. So when the person is living in this imaginary world, when they are living in this propaganda, it's impossible to come into any kind of agreement. It's impossible to get into any peaceful negotiation.
The war has now entered its 11th week, and as you say, Vladimir Putin did not use the speech today to declare victory or to escalate the conflict or to order a general mobilization of Russian troops against Ukraine, as many had predicted. He didn't nuclear war, although, as you say, he did slam the West and NATO. Where do you think the conflict is headed then?
Well, we plan to win and to push Russia back from our, make sure that they wouldn't come back again. Putin is saying we need to be concentrated on our plan, and by the whole democratic world. We need to make sure that we have all the sanctions in place, We need to make sure that Russia does not find new markets for its energy resources. Ukraine is receiving enough weapons, and we need to make sure that things are going fast. No matter what Putin says on Red Square, no matter what his plans are, we need to follow up our plan. And our plan is to win. You see, as of right now, Putin was not able to declare any victory. They did not even declare the victory of Mariupol. And you know why? Because they did not take Mariupol. Because our defenders are still there. They know it's a suicide mission, but they continue to defend it with their own lives. So now we are very motivated. The Ukrainians' morale is very high. We are getting more and more weapons from our allies, and we are planning to use these weapons to make sure that Russians go away from our land. This is as simple as that.
Okay. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made a surprise visit to Kyiv on the weekend, reopened the Canadian. He announced more sanctions, offered more funding for weapons. How important was it to you for Canada's Prime Minister to visit Kyiv, and are you satisfied with the support you've been seeing from Canada?
Canada has been actually spearheading many processes that we like to see from our allies, starting from sanctions, financial support, but there are two very important points for me as a member of parliament and for my country. The first is voting for Russia as a country sponsor of terrorism. Second, claiming that Russia is a war criminal. These are two things that are critically important, and right now they are in process to be voted in Canada, and I'm extremely grateful to Prime Minister Trudeau for forcing these actions in Canadian Parliament. So we're extremely happy to have a Prime Minister here. He's obviously a star and a sign of a great support and courage that we are receiving from our brothers and sisters in Canada. It's important for my people to see that there is no Ukraine fatigue, that the whole world is behind us as never before. Do not afraid to come here and say, we are with Ukraine. We are not leaving you alone here. We are going to support you no matter what. Here is the hand that we are showing you and directing you together towards the victory. So it was amazing, and it was a huge ramp up for morale for all Ukrainians around Ukraine.
All right. Kira Rudik, thank you so much for speaking to me tonight and to give us your perspective on where we are 11 weeks into this war, Russia's war against Ukraine. Thanks so much for your time, and please take care.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
Well, the next important event in the race for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada takes place in just 48 hours. That's when all 6 of the candidates will be on stage in Edmonton for the first party-sanctioned televised debate. It comes less than a week after 5 of the candidates gathered in Ottawa for a debate at the annual conference of a Conservative think tank. That often raucous and fractious debate was marked by attacks between the 2 perceived frontrunners, in particular, Pierre Poilievre and Jean Charest. That prompted Ontario MP and candidate Scott Aitchison to issue this warning.
Every time I hear a Conservative talk about some conspiracy theory, I realize that there's another group of swing voters in the GTA that just are not going to come our way, because all we do is yell and scream at each other. We're witnessing it now. I actually like all these people on this table. They're on this dais as well. They're good folks. And here we are, calling each other names. What Canadian is going to trust this lot? We've got to do better. And that's how we win elections.
And Scott Aitchison joins me now. Mr. Aitchison, good to see you. Thanks for taking time to speak with me today. I do appreciate it.
Oh, Peter, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Look, you lamented the personal attacks and the divisions in the debate last week. You called the partisan cheating for the party. And I guess I'm wondering, who do you think's to blame for and that behavior in the campaign so far?
Well, I think it's decades of political discourse that's been designed to divide us. You look at what goes on in the House of Commons and how our political war rooms operate. It's all about slicing and dicing the electorate to, win over a few votes over here versus over there. We've seen language really on, in both major parties about, language that seeks to divide. And I think it's just regular political discourse, and I'm bound and determined that we're going to improve it.
But do you think there's any one of the candidates that's particularly, determining that tone and leading that kind of discourse as you described?
No, listen, I'm not going to talk about my other candidates in this race. They're colleagues. They're, people that I'm getting to know, and they all have their particular passion for Canada and what they're trying to do. What I would like to do, though, is talk about ideas.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about policies that actually make sense for Canadians. And I'm looking forward to that at this next debate coming up in Edmonton. I want to hear how, each of the different campaigns, how they propose to actually create some action and get things done on the housing file, for example. We have a crisis in this country, and it's not just first-time home buyers. It's not just people looking for an affordable rental. It's not just, there's a spectrum of housing, and there's a crisis. It's not enough to just acknowledge there's a problem. We need to do more, because we've seen 7 years of a government that's been, I think, very well-meaning on the file and promising billions. We've seen countless photo ops on funding announcements, but very few ribbon cuttings. Okay. And we need action on this. And I'd like to hear some of my opponents' ideas on what they would do to happen.
Yeah, I think everybody would. And I just to close the loop on, you warned that Canadians won't elect your party if they see these kinds of divisions on display and Conservatives talking about conspiracy theories. But look, as well as I that leadership races aren't about Canadian voters. They're about Conservative members and their votes. And some candidates clearly pay off to have some very raw, open fights with leadership opponents. And I guess I want to know from you, what is it you think they're missing if they take that approach?
Well, and my is for not just my opponents in the race, it's for Conservative members as well, and all Canadians, frankly. If we want to expand our Conservative movement, if we want to win government, let me back up. If we have to expand the number of people that are interested in voting for us. And so our movement has to grow. And the only way we're going to do that is if we have the courage and the character and the respect amongst ourselves. We have to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. We have to be open to listening to each other and with respect. Colleagues in the caucus, for example, that I don't agree with the way they vote sometimes, and they don't agree with the way I vote sometimes. But we are friends, and we find common ground in the things that common ground on, and we don't fight. We need to do that as a movement. So my message is not just to the other leadership, all Conservatives. We must work together. We must show that we can be respectful of each other and respectful of all Canadians.
But a lot of the fingers are pointing at Mr. Poilievre for setting this tone. Do you believe the Conservative Party can win the country if Pierre Poilievre's the leader?
Regardless of who the leader is at the end of this race, we all have to come together. And I'm not going to comment specifically on any particular candidate. We will definitely come together, and whatever happens to me in this race, I'm going to certainly play a role in that. I'd like to demonstrate my leadership abilities as the leader of the party and show that leadership is about inspiring the people around. And that's the way I lead. It's the way we need to make sure our next leader of our Conservative Party does.
There's been a lot of discussion about the abortion issue, in particular in recent days, and how what we're seeing in the United States leadership race, and perhaps provide a greater role for pro-life party members in determining the outcome of the race. You've stated you're pro-choice and will defend a woman's right to choose. What role do you think the abortion issue could play in determining the outcome of the leadership race?
Well, I think it'll play a role just like every other issue. I think there are bigger issues that Canadians are dealing with right now, unfortunately, what goes on in the United States does tend to trickle into our politics as well, and that's certainly why I address the issue. But again, this is another example of where, as Conservatives, we need to respect each other. I know there are a lot of members of our caucus that don't have the same opinion and don't have the same beliefs that I have. But we can still talk to each other. We can still respect each other. And there are lots of things that we can be doing. In fact, it's one of the points that I made in some of my messaging around this particular issue is that I think it's important for us to find common ground. And I think one of the areas we can find common ground with folks in our movement in our country who are not pro-choice is to make sure that we're supporting organizations that give all the information available, give information to women so they can make their own informed choice. Leslie Lewis has mentioned Pregnancy Care Centres Canada. It's an organization that provides information for women, and that's all they do. And they provide support if it's requested. So I think there's an area where I know we can find common ground. Not pro-choice, not pro-life, but be pro-woman.
I know. I want a chance here to put in the stand for, and in this context, you want to do away with supply management. You want to increase defense spending to 2% of GDP. You want to boost housing supply by municipalities if they ease development restrictions. You oppose a carbon tax, just as the other candidates do. And a little bit about you. You're a former real estate agent, former mayor of Huntsville, Ontario, a rural guy, if I can say it. Why do you believe you're the best choice to lead the party?
I've got the experience of actual leadership, actually getting things done. It is, of course, at the municipal level, but housing is a great example. When I was mayor of Huntsville, I led a council that was engaged on this issue, and we pulled out all the stops. We gave land to organizations like Habitat for Humanity and private developers if they signed agreements with us to make sure a certain number of rental units were affordable. What was missing for us there was a reliable federal partner, though. I know how to get things done on the ground. I know how to speak the language of municipal mayors and municipal planners. I've been writing 2 official plans, zoning bylaws. I've chaired planning committee. I understand how that works, how the rubber hits the road. And it's going to take a collaborative approach, which is the approach that I always take, because prime ministers don't wave magic wands and tell the provinces what to do. We've got to work together. We've got to work with municipalities and the private sector. I've got a huge track record of building those relationships, getting those kinds of projects done, doing it in a collaborative way. And so that's why I bring to potentially leadership of the party. It's what I would bring as a prime minister, collaboration.
All right. Well, you've certainly made the case for different kinds of candidates. I'll get together Wednesday evening in Edmonton, Alberta, and we'll see you on that stage that night as well. Scott Aitchison, thanks for your time tonight. Good to talk to you, and take care.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, time now to bring in our panel of press gallery journalists. Susan Delacourt is a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. Thank you both for being here this week. Susan, let's talk about Conservatives. Just finished speaking with Scott Aitchison and concerns around party unity and the way they've been behaving on the debate stage in the first debate we saw. The first party-sponsored debate happens this Wednesday. What will you be watching for given what we saw last week?
I went last week to that debate, and Mr. Aitchison, I thought he did himself a lot of favors in that on that stage when he was accurately predicting and forecasting what people would think watching that spectacle. I haven't seen. I've watched a lot of debates in my life, and I've not seen that one go that low so quickly. And we've seen the reports over the weekend too. Sort of, that's the common review, whether it's from Conservatives or themselves. So I'm looking for a tone check, I guess. I thought it was interesting. If they were playing to that room, then certainly the room was appreciating the low blows. But I think this party-sponsored debate on Wednesday is intended to be to the greater party and the nation as a whole. And so I'm trying to see mainly with Mr. Poilievre whether he changes his tone a bit. Right. Because it was nasty and it was personal and it was visceral. It was very much playing to the room, but I don't think to the nation. What
do you be watching for, Joël-Denis? Given, Pierre Poilievre, every time he makes it clear, he doesn't say he's campaigning to be Conservative Party leader, right? He says he's campaigning to be the Prime Minister. And that's what a lot of people have been talking about is, can you win the audience outside the Conservative Party? That's what you need to do to be the Prime Minister. What will you be watching for?
Well, the same as Susan, the tone, whether Mr. Poilievre will use the same attacks that he used in the last debate, and whether Jean Charest will use different tactics to respond to those personal attacks. But it's funny you say that Pierre Poilievre is running to be Prime Minister, but there's one step that he needs to do, which is to win that leadership. The consensus is that he's ahead of everybody. Now, does he project a prime ministerial image by behaving that way? That's the question that people are asking themselves right now. And to many elder statements, if I may say, in the conservative movement, they don't like what they're seeing. Mike Harris, one of them, Preston Manning, the former leader of the Reform Party.
Right, we've seen
last time.
And Jason Kenney. We've seen
Kenney, so,
party people from both wings of the party, if I can put it that way, the progressive side and the Canadian Alliance side, where the two parties were born.
And to me, they're expressing one concern, that will it be possible to rebuild unity after this race? And that usually you don't ask that question after the first debate. You ask that question after the third or the fourth debate and midway through the campaigns. But at the offset, asking would well for the Conservative Party, in my sense, because of the tenor of the debate that are taking place right now.
Susan, over the weekend on CTV, former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge fired back at Pierre Poilievre for calling the central bank financially illiterate in his campaign over inflation rates in this country. Dodge called Poilievre's assertions BS, and he didn't use the two letters I just used. He was happy to say the whole word. What effect do you think David Dodge's comments have on the Poilievre campaign and on the race, perhaps?
Again, there are two different audiences here. I think the people who respect institutions, respect David Dodge, have, the idea that he is a senior statesman, and like Joël-Denis was talking about, will be scandalized and worried about that. That's not, it seems, who Pierre Poilievre is talking to. He's talking to people who are fed up with elites and mandarins and everything that is Ottawa. So that there's a chance he'll play it up, and he seemed to enjoy it. He put it out on Twitter today and doubled down on it. He seems to enjoy seeing himself as fighting for the little guy against big Ottawa. So I suspect it's this whole question of who is deciding this race. If it is the angry base, then Pierre Poilievre has a leg up on that. But if it's a wider audience, it's a riskier move. What
do you think, Joël-Denis?
Well, I'm sure that Mr. Poilievre will keep using those statements made by David Dodge and other representatives of the Bank of Canada, because we've seen also testimony from Tiff McLean, the Bank of Governor, president of the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of Canada, sorry. And Mr. McLean also said that he does not understand why people like Mr. Poilievre are claiming that the Bank of Canada contributed to the current problem right now. It's a larger problem. But as Susan mentioned, Mr. Poilievre is campaigning against institutions, which in part he wants to run afterwards when he's prime minister, if he ever becomes prime minister. So there's a little bit of a oddity there, if I may say that. He's running against the very institutions he wished to have control over.
And it's kind of interesting to watch the dynamics, Susan, because it makes me wonder, if Pierre Poilievre doubles down on that on the campaign stage, do any of those other candidates come to the defense of those institutions, as we've described them, that Pierre Poilievre's attacking? Is there too much risk in that? They're basically giving him a clear path to attack, the Bank of Canada and those institutions we talk about, the elites. And you wonder if somebody like Jean Charest, who's been close to many of those institutions in his career, ever says, "Hey, wait a minute here."
Well, you saw what happened when Charest tried to talk about the protests as being illegal and make the case, similar to what JD is saying, that you can't run against an institution that you want to run. You can't make laws. I think the way he says it is, you can't make laws and then break laws. So I don't know that has worked for Charest. We'll see. But he would be the one you would expect. I'd like to make this a hat trick. I'd love to see what Mark Carney, another former Bank of Canada governor, it'd be kind of fun to watch that too. I think another interesting dynamic change, which we should probably mention, is this week's debate will feature Patrick Brown. Right. And how that changes the chemistry around all of them will be fascinating.
It gives Pierre Poilievre another person to attack.
Exactly. But then it's 2-on-1 against Poilievre too. So that could be fascinating.
Okay, Joël-Denis, let me pivot here to the Prime Minister's surprise visit on the weekend to Ukraine. Spoke earlier in the program to a Ukrainian parliamentarian who was thrilled to have him there. Thought it was great that he was there. Sent a message of support to Ukrainians, and while announcing more money for weapons, more sanctions against the Russians. How significant was it, do you think, that Justin Trudeau went and that he reopened the Canadian embassy while there?
Well, it's significant, and the timing of it is also very significant because it was on the eve of the military parade in Moscow, which Vladimir Putin wanted to use to promote, his war in Ukraine, if I may say. But it's very significant. And I did talk to the Foreign Affairs Minister, Mélanie Joly, today, and she mentioned to me that the trip to get there was quite long and secret. They took a train from Poland to Kyiv for 12 hours in the night of Saturday to Sunday, just to get there. But they wanted to be there before the May 9th, today, actually, before the military parade in Moscow, just to send a powerful signal to Russia that their plans are not working as they were planning. So this is significant, and you could expect Mr. Trudeau or Madame Christophe, who was on the trip, or Madame Mélanie Joly to go back again in the future. That was mentioned to me by Mélanie Joly. They plan to go back just to continue the support which is necessary for the Ukrainian people.
What are your thoughts, Susan, as you watch this unfold over the weekend and news of it, that after being pushed from a number of different circles, and the Canadian government always said, look, we have safety concerns here, we got to get those fixed first before we send any of our people over or reopen the embassy, but that's now happened, and how important is that?
Hugely symbolic. I'm not sure what substantially comes out of this, but symbolism is important, as JD was mentioning. I was struck by the secrecy around this. There have been prime ministers who've gone into Afghanistan but brought reporters with them. That was not the case in this one. Also, being of my gender, it was Mother's Day, and Jill Biden was there, and a Canadian woman deputy prime minister, a Canadian foreign minister woman. I think there was very much, whether it was intentional or not, it looked coordinated with the United States, and they did theirs for Mother's Day. The Canadians did theirs as sort of an expression, a sort of I don't know what the gesture is. The words are fading me, but the idea of a slap in the face to Putin, and being done by some of the most senior people, Canada and the United States, and throw in Bono, who also showed up in a subway.
Right, played an impromptu concert, you too, in the subway.
Yeah. So I think it's highly symbolic. I think we're trying to find out what happens because of this. Right. Certainly, I'm hoping it reined in Putin's rhetoric today, but who knows what reigns in Putin.
Very quickly,
Peter, if I may say, when I talked to they want to do a lot of work to demining Ukraine, because one of the problems that we're seeing after some territories are falling back into the hands of Ukrainians is that there are a lot of anti-mine personnel mines left over by Russian forces, and that's a big problem to be sure that the population can go back to its cities and suburbs without risking their lives. And
earlier in the program, that sort of role for Canada was underlined by the parliamentarian I spoke to, that Canada's, while it may not have the military heft of many other countries, it's taking a lead role in a lot of these process issues, the demining, the criminal charges and persecutions to come later. So, okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for your time tonight. Good to speak to you too. You too.
Nice to see you.
Not you too, you too. Good to see you again. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Peter.
And that's all for another edition of Primetime Politics on CPAC. I'm Peter Van Dusen, and for all of us here at CPAC, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.